Hello, everybody. Welcome to another geopolitical analysis video. Please like and subscribe, comment below. You know the way to support the channel. We do a lot of research for you guys, and we're happy to do so. So, the first week of 2023 comes to an end. It is Friday. Yeah, Friday, January 6th of 2023. And the day started with negative news, but the markets rallied off of it. Apparently, in the US, the payrolls came out, the numbers, and wages grew much slower than what was originally anticipated by many. Right? It rose 0.3%. So, a lot of these December payrolls came in slightly higher than expected. And that's based on what the Dow Jones expected. Okay, yeah. So I was looking at the markets today, and the markets really rallied off of these news. Now you might wonder, like, am I living in Alice in Wonderland here? Like, why would negative news really be regarded as something positive for the markets? And when I talk about the markets, I mainly talk about the US market, right? The S&P 500, the Dow and the Nasdaq, also the Canadian TSX, the Toronto Exchange, but also Europe. I've noticed that a lot of the domestic economies in Europe have really picked up lately. A very interesting rally, and that is from a mixture of news. Right? You can take a lot of different news and put it together as a mosaic. And if there's something that we learned last year for analysts who like to go through data, is that you can never paint a picture well enough. There's always, and especially the last few years, especially after COVID, the news keep on unfolding at such a high rate. It is really hard to absorb what is going on and dissect and make sense, because initially we talked a lot about inflation, and how that happened. Yes, the money supply affected it, but also the spending, the budget. The governments have been spending too much. It's not just the money supply, right? So money supply doesn't come down to uh, the end consumer or the people in the streets, right? It goes to a lot of different institutions and parts of the government that buy back their own debt. Yes, that happens. And the central banks have been doing that, printing and then buying off their own debt. But anyways, the point here is I'm trying to make is that now the new word is deflation. And of course, we talked about how inflation, deflation usually come together as when central banks intervene, they usually over tighten, and that's what happens. We go into a deflationary period where our assets are devalued, purchasing power has been going down. And of course, people say to me, hey, you know what? The DXY is going up, and the strength of the US dollar last year, it ripped higher. Yeah. But that's relative to other currencies. Other currencies are not doing so well. You're just the best, you're a decent house in a bad neighborhood, like many like to say. So interesting story here. And I was looking at especially please take a look at gold. It has gone just a beautiful rally ever since the beginning of November. And some say it's attributed to BRICS, as we mentioned. But I think we're entering into an era, like many say, where the focus is going to be on hard assets and not on the tech growth and the equities that we've seen rallied from the excess of liquidity. We're in this dollar shortage, right? And now I'd like to talk. Speaking of the dollar shortage, What that really means is that there's less dollars for the emerging markets. So a lot of the Eastern countries, also Africa, Europe as well. And the euro dollar system is a separate economy from the US. And really, it started because of the over collateralization that the US was offering to Europe in order to have to to give out more loans essentially. And Europe found this, and this has been going on for many decades now, found this very attractive because, hey, mortgages are very safe in the United States. You can have a 30-year term. So yeah, okay, so they would collateralize that, and hence the European markets would take this excess of dollars at a low interest and invest and do other things. So now it was funny because I picked up this story today. It's really funny. I picked up the story that President of France, Emmanuel Macron, who I have mixed feelings um, about. He said something very funny. He said, so apparently there's a baguette crisis, right, in France. So there's a problem because tens of thousands of bakers are going to close down, and they're shutting down their business, not because people are not buying baguettes, people who are not buying pastries. It's because, so again, the consumer demand is there, but the supply is artificially destroyed. And what I mean destroyed is that they cannot pay for their electricity, and the raw materials exist for their product, right? But they cannot continue their business any longer because of the surge in electricity bills in Europe. Greece, where I'm from, has one of the highest per kilowatt price in Europe. Greece, which is surrounded by so much sea, hydroelectricity factories could be, producing. You have solar, you have wind, you have geothermal, you have incredible potential, natural gas, oil, right? Yet the people there are paying ridiculous 3 and 4 times as much as they were paying in 2022. Now, we're not surprised, and especially if you've been following my videos, we are not surprised here. As I explained in our video, COVID-19 economy, because of the lockdowns, right, and the stimulus, the government spending, et cetera, are in the future, we will have to deal with these repercussions because that's going to slow down demand, create more supply chain problems, et cetera, et cetera. So now we're seeing this, especially in Europe, because Europe, again, has had over the last several years terrible energy policies. It's not Putin. Europeans are the ones who, and these small clubs that profiteered from Russian cheap energy, they profiteered and they created this dependency. After 2014, you would think 2014 is when Russia had a thing with Crimea, with part of Ukraine, which historically belongs to Russia. And I mean, Russia started from Kiev. That's a whole different story. Ukraine is Russia, and Russia is Ukraine in some weird way. Although, yes, you have religious and other political ideologies, et cetera, and ethnic, to the smaller degree, ethnic differences there. The Eastern Bloc of Germany, the ex-chancellor Angela Merkel, and Gerhard Schroeder, they're the ones who created this fiasco. Yet they're out of the picture. They're innocent. They're not paying these crazy energy bills, and even if they are, they have millions and millions of dollars, right? Because those type of politicians have access to ridiculous capital. To them, it's not about the money; it's about credit, right? And the innocent people who are being decimated right now are having to pay. And Emmanuel Macron, from all the leaders, he says, well, either defer the payments, so don't pay them now, pay them in the future, defer the payments, or get a loan to deal with this, because that's all we can do. Excuse me, Mr. Macron. We knew that having a 40% dependency on Russian gas and oil, which natural gas of Russia and oil is being repackaged by other countries and sent back to Europe, which is a total different story, right? So those sanctions don't really exist, right? Um, Not only that, but there's been such an underinvestment, underdevelopment in fossil fuels, hydrocarbons, right, in Europe. And there's been an overemphasis in solar energy and all these weather tethered technologies, which are unreliable and you cannot sustain for an entire year. So let's say there's a blizzard in Europe. Are the solar farms going to produce energy? Barely, barely. And if anybody wants to debate this, this is just, you know, it's biology 101. Now, the propaganda that exists, the anti-Putin propaganda, and the US propaganda, and the Russian propaganda, is, pointing at different people, and they're all pointing and calling out each other when the average person is the one suffering. And in this case, they're not only suffering psychologically from what happened with COVID, we still haven't digested what happened. People think this happened a lifetime ago. It's like I was looking back at some of our videos here on this channel, and I was thinking to myself, wow, like this really happened, where people were, quarantined and locked up, afraid to go out, and still are. And now politicians are saying, well, there's a labor shortage. You caused it. I'm sorry, we look at the problem, the problem is created out of nowhere. We don't know. We still don't know where the problem was created from. Was it created from China, from the labs, or out naturally? There's more information hinting that it came from a lab. That was a conspiracy theory one time ago. But now we are just receiving one thing after another. And that is why I said to you early on in our last video that 2023 is going to be a year of further surprises. I picked up another story that there are a lot of Russians, a lot of native Russians who've left Russia, went to Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and other countries. And they're reporting that there's going to be a mass mobilization again mid-January for the Ukrainian war. And I ask myself, after reading this, I'm sorry, but this Zelensky type, we know he was an actor and all, but does he have to be so in your face? Does he have to be like, it's so apparent that he's playing a role and he's following orders from other places. One hint I can give you, because I ran into a problem and got shadow banned for a while. Look at who are the highest paying donors of the Democrats, and you'll come to realize who's pushing Zelensky. So Zelensky saying no truce for the Orthodox Christmas. Of course, he's Jewish, and maybe he doesn't care. And maybe a lot of the political leaders, and this is not anti-Semitism, but you might be Jewish and not care about Christmas. That's your own, that's your own prerogative. But you cannot enforce that onto others, right? Because there's so many Orthodox Christians in Ukraine, and but the because was well, Putin is not gonna. He's a hypocrite. He started the war. He needs to get off our land. Sure. But wouldn't it be wise to find a way to stop a war that you might not win? I get it. I come from Greece. We're patriotic. We were always outnumbered and fought, for millennia. The Persian Empire, the Mongols, the Seljuk Turks, the Ottomans, the Romans. We had the Franks. We had the Crusaders who came during the Byzantine Empire. We know Greece historically for over 5,000 years now has been fighting off larger enemies. The Celts, we had a lot of raids that were coming from the north. Now, I understand the level of patriotism, and I also sympathize. But in this situation, the outermost perspective, because Russia is advancing, and we said Russia is not doing a blitzkrieg war. This is not a war where I'm going all in and all out. No, this is a wear and tear war that is continuing to take place. And the wear and tear strategy here that is being implemented is a tactic in order to wear you out of your resources, drain you mentally as well. This is a different type of war, a war that Russia seems that it can endure with many, many costs. And for many analysts out there, Russia is losing the war because it's putting in more, and getting out less, far less. And of course, human life is invaluable. There's no price tag on it. And we're talking about millions and millions who are being not only displaced because they're leaving, both Russians and Ukrainians and a lot of Europeans. But in this situation, we're seeing no end. And it would be wise to reflect on these holidays, holidays to reflect and see outside of this materialistic me dimension that we live in, and think about the problems that we're creating for the future. So yes, rather doomy and gloomy, but it's not all doom and gloom. But we must focus on these things and ask ourselves, what are these governments, these autocratic establishments doing to our lives? Because although it's easy for us to judge Putin, across the Atlantic, you have a Trudeau government that is out of touch of reality, just out of touch of reality, cares about transgenders and sex, genitalia mutilation and depopulation and all that absurd wokeism, and attacks its own scholars, its own academia, right? The bright minds who are objective, who are not politically leaning on the liberals or the conservatives, and who are telling you straight out, society is running to a cliff. Where we're going, we've done that before in the past, right? Dictatorship, communism, yada yada. We know these factions, and we're doing it again. We're falling for this cyclical mentality. We go from one extreme to another, and he's alarming. He's sounding the knell of reason. But you see, the government of Trudeau is trying to silence people who practice skeptical thinking, critical thinking, right? So all the ideals that came from the ancient Greeks that really forged the world wouldn't be the way how it is right now if it wasn't for these ancient people who, through testing different models and from observing the outcomes over a period of time, came to the conclusion, this is it, people. This is it. And our lifestyle, the globalization that we were, especially my generation was bred into, is realizing, there's a break here. There's something that we're lacking, and we're not going to have a breakthrough if we continue down this road. And I made a video about neo feudalism and neo medievalism, and you can go there and check a lot of these red signs that I think that we need to be paying attention to. Although there are many people who think that this is just the passing of time, things happen and this is history. And there are many people who don't care. They just want to go throughout their daily lives like an empty vessel, like an empty vessel, and not have anything to do with their world because they're already defeated. It's a defeatist mentality, right? We all need to think ahead and see how we can make things better. Here, we don't communicate anymore. Especially in Canada, people are so into their own world, they don't even talk to their neighbors. And it's also because you have these enclaves of different civilization, different cultures who are not really mingling together. We don't have this homogenous society. We're all into our own bubble, and that is deadly. And that leads to nowhere but either civil war or destruction of society. Because if you can never agree on the foundation, how can you move forward, right? Anyways, I digress. So we talked about the French baguette crisis. That was very, very funny. I thought that Macron was trolling people there. Um, but yeah, we're also seeing that a lot of these COVID jabs, of course, were detrimental, and there were side effects that were just people were silenced about that, and journalists are equally responsible. The media, but in this, we're seeing now tangible, real time examples of what many people would say, "Oh, this conspiracy theory," or "This is," you know, the I mean, Robert Malone is one of the inventors of the mRNA vaccine. Said that this is genetical treatment. This is not just your ordinary flu vaccine. But people didn't want to see it that way because we were engulfed in fear. We were always the news, not ourselves, but we saw people how they took this virus, right? And the formula, the panacea here was the vaccination, right? Now, we see conflicts everywhere. And although there's conflict everywhere, there's a lot of positivity as well. And in this case, we're seeing that there's going to be a bit of a turn, a bit in this contracting zone where you have a contract and a constricting economy where the growth is slowing. Everything is in this contraction mode, especially the weather here. You look at that, we have winter. Hey, it's a perfect time to contract and reflect. In this case, there are many good alternatives, and I think there's going to be a turn to hard assets like we've discussed before, like gold, silver, etc., different commodities. And this might be better for a lot of people because we've lost touch, I believe, with what is real, like the value of things, because it's so distorted with this money supply that's been going up incrementally since the 2008 crisis. And I think a lot of people now are going to see the value in not seeing your home as an investment necessarily, and also holding gold, holding some silver, and thinking how to be more autonomous, perhaps do some indoor growing, come up with different alternatives to combat inflation, but also be able to increase your skills of survival. Because we've become really complacent here in the West, especially. Um, that was all I wanted to really discuss with you guys as a ending. As an end of the first week of 2023. That was very interesting, the way how we just started with a shebang, especially in the markets that rallied so high. About COVID, we're hearing that there might be an emergence of this variant. And of course, there's again this fear of, what if this is more deadly? And it could be, because we never doubted that this existed. What we doubted was the way we were treating this and how we were behaving. Um, and this is also another thing to consider, because it looks like the climate has been in the epicenter of many news outlets there, discussing a lot about, the climate crisis, and all these people who have really hearkened this nomadic thinking, this group herd thinking, this like, where I'm going with this is that, like, this ESG movement, yes, there's a lot of truth in it, but it's, I think that we're going to see that the energy sector has been really, uh, people have been very misinformed about fossil fuels and our dependency on oil and gas. That's not going anywhere. And I think that people are going to, find themselves hard pressed to believe that it's not going to go anywhere. But we're going to keep on using that thing for another 1,000 years. And I think that people are going to slowly understand that this whole electric vehicle, this whole green energy thing is just another marketing. It's just another scam, right? It people don't These people don't care about carbon emissions, and quite frankly, carbon emissions should not be anybody's concern. And the reason why I say this is because since 2000, the planet has become greener. Places like Sahara has been seeing this influx of vegetation, greenery, these trees that grow, in the Middle East all of a sudden. So we're seeing parts of the world have a larger number of forestation and vegetation because of carbon. And this is biology. This is biology. Plants need carbon. And yes, we exhale carbon. But that is why I got plants, and plenty of them, in my house, because they like carbon. They like a lot of these gases that I do not necessarily need. But when they talk about eliminating carbon emission, what they're really saying is that they want to eliminate you. Because to say that we want to deplete helium because helium does X is a different way of saying we want to destroy life, a form of life, in order to achieve this outcome. So whenever we hear about carbon emissions, and we're being brainwashed because they pepper us with all this BS, this climate crisis, and we have all these henchmen who go in front of TVs that we think is the truth, right? The gospel. So now we're going to see, and especially next year, I think you're going to see a lot of countries face problems. And if governments don't focus on producing commodities, real tangible things, as opposed to relying on the dollar, the cheap dollar, I think that people are going to find themselves just in a very, very difficult situation. We're already talking about deglobalization, deindustrialization, and these are the many setbacks. Because agriculture, if you think about agriculture, is the base, is the base. When you take that out and you create a dependency, and you have these large conglomerates who we depend on, that affects our society. That inflates prices, creates supply chain issues. Because think about it, agriculture in many countries leads to tourism, right? Leads to products and services, and leads to a booming economy. We're seeing more and more that this is a problem in Europe, and apparently it doesn't fit the woke agenda. I hope you guys had a good week. Hope you're good wherever you are. Please like, subscribe, comment below. Enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you soon again on our channel. Bye for now.